I give talks on the impacts of animal agriculture and different food groups to discuss how we as individuals can build a sustainable food system through our dietary choices. So I have a background in chemistry. Wrong button. I have a background in chemistry, and I got my master's in sustainability, where I researched carbon mitigation pathways chemically, looking at this artificial leaf structure. And this is all because I've been super passionate about finding solutions towards climate change. And what I realized in my studies is that there is a huge gap in our sustainability efforts and what is really having an impact on the world around us, and that is our food system. Okay, right button that time. So as of now, there are 8 billion people on this planet. We all need food, and we all need water. But these resources are only going to get more scarce as we reach exponentially growing populations and extreme weather patterns, droughts, flooding, fires. And the ability to grow crops is only going to get harder as we reach global record highs. Already, 50% of Earth's habitable land is dedicated towards agriculture. And in the US alone, 70% of our freshwater reserves is for agriculture. This leaves little room and resources for additional crops, which is inevitable. We're going to grow in size, and we're going to need more food. So I'm here to teach you guys how to eat smarter, to fit our consumption within the realms of this Earth's capacity. And by the end of this talk, I hope to convince you that a plant-based diet is necessary in order to save the planet and feed future generations. And I'm not the only one that thinks this. According to United Nations' most recent report, highlighting code red warnings on rising temperatures, stated that just addressing our energy sector, our entire energy sector globally, and advancing our carbon mitigation techniques would not be enough to keep us from reaching global temperatures that are dangerous temperatures that would leave this world as we know it unrecognizable and cause irreversible damage. What they stated, along with those things, is that we have to shift towards plant-based eating as a society to have any fighting chance against climate change. And the reason they emphasize plant-based eating is because animal agriculture is either the top or one of the leading contributions or the leading environmental impact of all the the leading cause of almost every environmental impact, there we go, that contributes to climate change today. So we're going to go over that today. We're going to go over how our current food system in the US, heavy in animal-based foods, how it impacts deforestation, emissions, biodiversity loss, also food scarcity, water shortages, water quality, and how we can address those things with a plant-based diet, how we can increase biodiversity, increase food security, drastically reduce our emissions, and also address social justice issues involved with our current food system, and welfare implications as well. There's a lot of things that goes into sustainability. Sustainable for the environment, the people, and economically sustainable. There's a lot of things that go into it. So we're going to touch up on all of that, a well-rounded topic. So it's going to be a 1-hour talk from when I first started, and then I will have 15 minutes afterwards to answer any questions you guys may have. Okay, good, thumbs up, okay. So first, let's get into the resource inefficiency of different food groups. So raising animals for food is the most inefficient way to produce food. It utilizes more land, water, and emits more greenhouse gas emissions than any other food group for the most part. This is a graph from Our World in Data, and they look at the land use of foods per 1,000 kilocalories. So the ones that use the most land for the same amount of calories produced is here, so on the top. So you get beef, followed by lamb and mutton, cheese, beef from dairy herd, milk, pig meat, poultry meat, fish, eggs. And then as you go further down the list, you go to the more plant alternatives that are more land efficient. Hi, Sean. Okay, so what this graph is basically telling you is that you could create 100 times, more than 100 times more food with potatoes than beef on that same piece of land. And I hear, well, animal products are higher in protein. So what about the protein to land ratio? I have that graph as well. And this is land use per 100 grams of protein. And still at the top, it's still a common trend, lamb and mutton, beef, cheese, milk, and then other plant alternatives are further down below this graph. But farmed prawns gets pretty down there, is an exception for some reason, but not so much when it comes to calorie to land ratio and gram of food to kilogram of CO2. And those are all things to consider when looking at the overall resource use and emission impact of a food. Oh, I'm like breathing all heavy in here. Gotta put it back. Okay, so now let's also get into this picture. I really like this visual because it's from the Union of Concerned Scientists, and it really highlights the inefficiency here, and it shows 85% of our foods are plant foods, and they just take up a small fraction of the overall land used for food. Like I said, remember, 50% of Earth's habitable land is dedicated towards agriculture. Of that, 80%, about 80%, is animal agriculture, yet it only provides 18% of the world's calories and 37% of the world's protein. That's incredibly inefficient. 80% of our agricultural land dedicated to animal agriculture, but we get less than 20% of our energy from it. And so emissions too. And those numbers are a bit different from the Union of Concerned Scientists. There is a margin of different percentages. That's why I used multiple sources to state that. But let's get into greenhouse gas emissions per kilogram of food product. So the top are the ones with the largest carbon footprint: beef, lamb, mutton, beef from dairy herd, prawns. And then as you go lower, it's a common trend. So animal products, especially grazing animals, on the top, and then plant products on the bottom. Okay, there we go. So this is from the EPA. This is the global greenhouse gas emissions by economic sector. And as you can see, our biggest chunk of the pie, 25%, is electricity and heat production. And we try to address this. We do solar panels, we do, what else? Wind power, hydropower. And then transportation, 14%. We try to address that too. Hydro-fueled vehicles, electric vehicles, carpooling. But why don't we talk about this sector? Agriculture, forestry, and other land use. 24%. It's just 1% less as the biggest part of the pie. It's the second biggest part of the pie. So these two numbers, 14.5 to 18%, this is from the FAO, the Food Agriculture of Organization, or Food and Agriculture Organization, and they are the best equipped and most specialized to look at emissions from foods. This is from two different sources from FAO, so the lower estimation and the highest estimation of the global emissions of animal agriculture. Even the lowest exceeds all global transportation emissions: planes, cars, trains. And it makes up 60 to 75% of that large orange chunk of the pie. Why aren't we talking about our foods, the type of foods we're eating, when we can drastically reduce emissions that way, even more so than transportation? It's something worth talking about. This study I'm going to bring up a lot. It's the most extensive study ever done and recorded in literature today on the environmental impacts of our foods. It is from Oxford University, and it's published in the Science Journal. And I gotta stop walking around. Okay, yeah, so it looks at about 40,000 different farms in over 100 different countries, looking at over 40 different food groups that account for about 90% of the foods we eat at the grocery store. So extremely extensive. And what the scientists found, what they concluded, is that the single biggest way one individual can reduce their environmental impact, the single biggest way, is going plant-based. Not recycling, not getting electric vehicles, not carpooling, not turning off the light, not turning off the faucet when you're brushing your teeth. And these are all very important things. But the single biggest way one can reduce their overall environmental impact is going plant-based. Okay, so the number one source of deforestation is agriculture. You can find that on Our World in Data. You can also find that on Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. They did a sensing survey, and they found that agricultural expansion drives almost 90% of global deforestation, and this disproportionately comes from animal-based foods. Remember, 80% of total agricultural land is for animal agriculture. It's also the number one source of deforestation in our Amazon rainforests. This study particularly looked at the Brazilian Amazon. And what they found is that the main loss for all agro-industrial clearing was for pastureland, grassland for grazing animals, 63%. And what's scary about this is when you turn rainforest land into grassland, it's a whole lot more susceptible to forest fires. And we've seen this, and we've tracked it and published it in the literature today. As we expand grasslands in these areas, the likelihood of forest fires in those specific areas shoots up. So now, forest fires in the rainforest are a whole lot more prevalent now. Climate change doesn't help, about 3 times more. So, with all of this deforestation, because we're inefficiently using our land, and then the increase of these forest fires, it's no wonder that agriculture, disproportionately coming from animal agriculture, is the leading cause of biodiversity loss. Our current global food system is the primary driver of biodiversity loss. This is from the UN, with agriculture alone being the identified threat to 24,000 of the 28,000 species at risk of extinction. That's 86%. We're facing the next mass extinction, but this time it's done with humans. And we don't know the full repercussions of this next mass extinction. When species are gone, ecosystems become less resilient, and they start to collapse and fall, and so do the services and resources that they provide to us. But there's hope. If the world adopted a plant-based diet, this is from another study, we would reduce global agricultural land use from 4 to 1 billion hectares. We could free up 75% of agricultural land. And this leaves us with a whole lot of opportunity. With this land, we can reforest the land. We know that forests are carbon sinks. They suck in the CO2. So we can help with emissions that way. We can also rehabilitate species at risk of extinction. We can recreate those habitats, strengthen those ecosystems, and address our species extinction. We could also have enough room for additional crops when we grow in size, when we're going to need more food, because we know that's going to happen. And we can address current food insecurity. This is from the Humane Society. Of the world's nearly 6.8 billion humans, almost 1 people are malnourished, feeding half the world's grain crop to animals raised for meat, eggs, and milk instead of directly to humans is a significant waste of natural resources, including fossil fuels, water, and land. Currently, there are 830 million people starving on this planet. 830 million. Yet we manage to feed, not only feed, but fatten up 80 billion land animals each year for slaughter. How do we have enough resources to fatten up 80 billion land animals for slaughter, but 830 million people are starving? We inefficiently use our resources so we can have an abundance of animal-based foods in first world countries while less fortunate parts of the world suffer. World hunger cannot be solved without plant-based eating. Now, it's not the only solution. There's also resource allocation. There's also, power and people butting heads. There's a lot of things that goes into food security, but there's no question about it. We cannot address food insecurity without a plant-based solution. And if you don't believe me, there's tons of studies out there that say otherwise. This one, for example, is just one of the many. And it was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science journal. It's a US-based journal. And they were looking at the opportunity food cost of, don't read it yet, don't read it. That's the good part. We'll get to it. Just look down. So this study was looking at the opportunity food cost of food loss of different food groups. So how many resources you put into a food versus how much you actually get when it ends up on the shelf. And what they found, the ones that were the most inefficient with the largest food loss, coming at about 90%, was your meat and your dairy. And with their numbers, I created this graph to really highlight the difference in resource use with land. This is food produced per acre of cropland. I put beef, egg, and plants, all numbers from their study, together. Beef is the most land inefficient animal product in their study. And if you were to replace that acre of cropland with plants, you could create 20 times more food. And even with the most land-efficient animal product in their study, the most land-efficient, eggs, you could create twice as much food if you were to do it with plants. Their conclusion is what I found most astonishing. Concurrently replacing all animal-based items in the US diet with plant-based alternatives would add enough food to feed, on top of the US, in full 350 million additional people. This is well above the expected benefits of eliminating all supply chain food waste. We talk about food waste. Why aren't we talking about the type of foods we're eating when it has an even bigger impact? To put this into perspective, there are 320 to 330 million people in the US. So we could feed the entire US and then a whole nother nation the size of the US and then some. And then to put that on an individual perspective, even if you were just to go plant-based, you would free up enough resources to feed an additional human being. That's the power of plant-based eating. And that's the mindset we need to get into, especially when we are sharing this planet with about 8 billion people. Right now, in first world countries, we have the largest contributions to climate change. Yet people in third world countries that can't afford climate adaptation, assistance and all that, are the ones that end up suffering the most. Our everyday decisions are powerful, and plant-based eating is powerful. So before I go further, I want to get into some counter-arguments I hear a lot. I get them a lot in the question sector, so I just thought, let me just go ahead and get them out of the way. Local does not always equal sustainable. I hear, well, Morgan, I get my grass-fed beef from the local neighbor next door. It's grass-fed. It's just the town over. It's local. Fun fact, grass-fed produces more greenhouse gas emissions than grain-fed cows. Not saying it's better for the cows, just saying emission-wise, not so good. And studies find Life cycle assessments, this one, for instance, finds that transportation as a whole represents only 11% of the total emissions from food. And that's pretty high. This other study was saying how for meat, it's about 5% total emissions come from the transportation. But we'll go with this big number. We'll give the benefit of the doubt. So that means that about 90% of emissions come from the farming itself. That's where the big impact is. So you're a whole lot more better getting plant foods with a whole lot more food miles attached to them rather than your local animal-based foods. Okay, deforestation. I hear, well, if I were to go plant-based, that means a lot of soy and tofu, and tofu is a big part of deforestation. Well, there's lots of other things like grains and beans, and there's a lot of other things other than tofu. But, man, this really picks up on my breath. Sorry, guys. I know. Okay, so 77% of soy is used as animal feed, actually, and only 7% of soy is actually used for direct human consumption, like soy, milk, edamame, tofu. And so, yeah, most of this, remember, there's 80 billion land animals we're fattening up each year. That's a lot of food, and only a small percentage goes to meat, because the bones, the heat, the daily energy. So, yeah, and that's where most of our soy and maize is going towards, is animal feed. What this looks like is right there. The cow is restrained against her will. She has to be restrained. She doesn't want this done to her. And even in India, they put chains on her legs so she can't kick the farmer. And so the farmer, what he does is he puts an entire hand up her anus, holds her cervix in place, and then takes the other hand with an instrument into her cervix and inserts bull semen. That instrument, among the farmers, they refer to that as a rape rack. The farmers call that instrument themselves, that use it, a rape rack. And then the calf is taken away within 24 hours. This ensures that as much of the milk goes to the paying customer rather than the calf it was naturally intended for. And this is extremely emotional. It's that strong mammalian bond between a maternal cow and a baby calf. So the baby calf is crying. You'll oftentimes see the mother chasing the farmer away or the car. So she will cry for days on end and oftentimes lose her voice. And because of this excessive birthing, this isn't just one baby calf taken away from her. It's over and over and over again. And so her body gives out from excessive birthing. A couple ways this happens. She just starts to decline in milk supply just a little bit, and she's no longer profitable. Thrown away and slaughtered. Also, there'll be times because of the hard floors and all the birthing where her legs will start to split. So the farmers will put chains on the legs, just enough so she can take some steps and keep her from splitting. Or just a lame cow, she'll fall and she can't get up. Because of these stresses, this is what happens when we treat animals like inanimate machines. And the udders, we have engineered, well, artificially, this breeding and we've bred them to produce as much milk as possible. So now her udders are holding more milk than what is naturally intended. And it's not, it doesn't feel good. It's very painful to hold this much milk. Just look, that's huge. Okay. Now egg-laying hens. The closest ancestor to egg-laying hens is the red jungle fowl. The red jungle fowl produces about 1 egg a month, just like humans, 1 unfertilized egg a month. And then that equates to 12 eggs a year. So the egg-laying hen has been manipulated and bred to produce so many eggs that it's one every 24 to 36 hours. This equates to 250 to 300 eggs a year. Red jungle fowl of similar build, 12 eggs a year. And now we are pushing the hen to the limit to 250 to 300 eggs a year. And with this egg birthing over and over and over again, there's a lot of birthing implications. The prolapse, where the insides become the outsides. This is very common. Sometimes it stays like that. Sometimes the egg gets stuck. And the egg requires a lot of calcium. So it's very common amongst these farms to have hens that have osteoporosis. If they have fractures and broken bones, it's because the calcium is being taken to produce all of these eggs. And in order to produce more hens, they have to have fertilized eggs, and then chicks. The female chicks suffer the same fate. The male chicks, they're not the same as broiler birds. They don't hold meat as efficiently, so they are killed day one. And so what this looks like is the worker will pick out the female chicks, and the male chicks, just feet away from the worker, will be blended up alive on a conveyor belt. There's a blender, and they're literally blended up alive. This is standard practice and legal. A cheaper way is the worker themselves will have to put them in a trash bag and close it on them. So they will die from being crushed or suffocation. It's a very long process, and the worker has to do this themselves. In the US, we kill enough chicks a year that equates to 30,000 a day. 30,000 chicks that have to be processed and killed by workers a day in the US. That's what we're asking from our people. And this study, they found that 48,000 hens in 40 different flocks have killbone fractures. This is from all the excessive birthing movements, and 4,100 had fractures out of that. That's 85% of the birds. So this isn't an isolated case. It's the majority that have fractures because we have bred them into this unsustainable breed. Okay, so birds used for meat, broiler birds. It's thousands of birds compacted in a shed for about 4 weeks. It's 5 to 7 weeks until they reach slaughter weight. That's not natural, but we've bred them that way. And in that shed, during that entire duration, it is not cleaned. Thousands of birds pooping for a month, not cleaned, over a month. So the ammonia buildup is toxic at this point. These conditions for the worker, this is from a study, pose serious health effects, with 25% of workers experiencing chronic bronchitis and 75% with acute bronchitis. The broiler birds, so the workers, they come in with protective gear, sometimes face masks if they have it, sometimes long boots, protective clothing. The broiler birds, unfortunately, are in there 24/7 and have no protective clothing. So they suffer from ammonia burns on their feet, skin, and eyes from the waste buildup. And this leads to blindness, raw skin, and respiratory infections. And the 5 to 7 weeks, like I said, it's not natural. So their organs cannot keep up with this large weight and this fast pace of growing. So they oftentimes have organ failure, or they get so big that they can't walk anymore, and they get stuck. They can't move to food or water, and they die from dehydration or starvation. Or they just sit there on that ammonia floor in direct contact and just sit for weeks on end and burn. So it's very painful. It's not sustainable for the chickens, and it's not sustainable for the workers. Pig farming. So this is a lot of times what it looks like. They're compacted in these cages or these crates, whatever you want to call them. But pigs are extremely intelligent. They have been shown to be smarter than dogs, and about as smart as your 3-year-old, your average 3-year-old. And so because of this, you'll see them gnawing on the cage, and that's very common, and animal experts say this is due to lack of stimulation and from a lot of anxiety buildup, frustration, and from literally going insane. That's why they cut off their tails as kids, as baby pigs, without any painkillers. The pig screams, and that's because they'll start gnawing on each other's tails because they're so frustrated and they need that stimulation. The pigs in gestation crates that give birth, they're in there for weeks on end, and it's a small crate where they can't even take a step forward, they can't even turn around. So when they give birth to their babies, they can't even tend to them, and a lot of times they crush them. But the most humane way to kill pigs is gas chambers, gassing them with CO2. And so they take these pigs, they put them in a gas chamber, it goes down and it gasses them up with CO2 for 2 minutes, and then they're dead. But the CO2 concentrations are so high that it burns. So the entire time the pigs are thrashing, if you see the footage for yourself, but their eyes are burning. What it feels like is your lungs on the inside are on fire and burning to death. And that's the most humane way we have so far. Okay, so would you want to be a slaughterhouse worker? No, of course not. No one wants to do this 8 hours a day, 40 plus hours a week. No one wants to see these scared eyes, hear the screams, see the blood, the gore. A lot of people suffer from PTSD from working at these facilities, and there's higher rates of crime by slaughterhouses. And it's no wonder when you create a facility that desensitizes violence. Also, it's one of the most dangerous places to work. Just think you have a fast production line, and or you have an animal that's running away, trying to get away from you, just scraggling around, and you have a bolt gun or a knife or something that can do a lot of damage. So things could go wrong, and you could get hurt, and then there's all these feces, guts, blood, and so a lot of room for infection. The most common issue for people is nerve damage because they are doing the same movement over and over again. This is, again, what happens when we treat animals and people like machines. So it's not sustainable for the workers. Also, this is how old animals are killed versus their natural lifetime. They don't even have the birthright to live their full lifetime, not even half. So for all these reasons, I hope it is worth it to you guys to prioritize a sustainable food system by moving towards plant-based eating for the sake of the animals, the slaughterhouse workers, the people that suffer from the pollution or food scarcity, emissions, our climate crisis, our oceans. I hope it's worth it to you guys. I have more to talk about, but this isn't supposed to be a downer talk. It's supposed to empower you guys because it's showing how huge of an impact we can have. A lot of us can't afford the next electric vehicle. A lot of us can't afford an entire thing of solar panels on our roof to offset our electricity. But what we can do is vote with our diet 3 meals a day. Even starting with just one, it makes a huge difference. And according to the Oxford researchers in that most extensive study, it's the single biggest way one can make a difference. And this is just a life cycle assessment. I won't get too much into it because it's been about an hour. So, but it's just showing a veggie burger compared against beef burgers from 2 different locations. And as you can see, the green is the veggie burger. In most of these, it's far smaller in impact. Land use, climate change, water scarcity, resource use, ozone depletion, which you can't really see there, but yeah, so it's not just one thing. There's so many different things we can have an impact on, even just with one burger. So I've been vegan for quite some time, and I know you don't want to like invest in something and try it out and it end up being really gross. So I have some really great ones that I would recommend to you. Beyond Beef. Beyond has some really good stuff. My favorite is Impossible. They have plant-based, yes, I see that, yeah. yeah. Breakfast sausage. They even have plant-based ground beef, so you can use it in lasagnas. You can use it to make spaghetti. You know, it's very versatile. And then, yeah, they have a lot. Bratwursts. And then dairying, I actually had that at my wedding about a little less than a year ago, and people were really taken back. They're like, what? This isn't chicken? The fibers are there. It's really great. They have a few different flavors. On the pricier side, if you want to get a cheaper vegan meat, there's like Boca, Gardein. Vegan dairy, my ultimate favorite is Miyoko's. It is the best one out there, especially if you like stinky cheeses like me. Ice cream, So Delicious is my favorite, but Ben & Jerry's, they even have dairy-free flavors. They have the Cherry Garcia they have a dairy-free flavor of that. Fish food, yeah. Oat milk creamer, that's pretty cool. And then dairy milk, so they have oat milk, hemp milk, soy milk, banana milk, I've seen. Yeah, almond milk, cashew milk, rice milk. They have all these different milks to account for everyone's food aversion and allergies. In the year 2023, there's no excuse. It's all available, and it's all available to us in Los Alamos. Let's see, veganese instead of mayonnaise. It's really good. Dragon Puffs, Takis. Lots of Takis are vegan in place of Flamin' Hot Cheetos. Just Egg. It's magic. I've seen it before my eyes. It's like a little mustard thing. You put it in a pan, and then it just rises into scrambled egg. It's good. Fun fact, a lot of the pre-made baking stuff like cakes and brownies, if they don't have the chocolate chips, they're vegan. So just add another vegan egg replacement, you know, vegan milk. Yes, there's tons of options out there. Lots of good stuff nowadays, and it's just expanding. And vegan cooking is a skill we can all learn. There's tons of resources on, Google. Yeah, lots of free bloggers with recipes. They take you step by step on how to do it. There's no excuse. The knowledge is out there. It just takes time. Vegan cheese, it doesn't melt the same. It takes a bit longer. Just putting that out there. So yeah, it's just some tweaks there. You got to learn. It's different, but we can all get the hang of it with a couple tries. And yeah, here's some really good sources. EPA for pollution stuff. FAO for food emissions is really good. Oxford University does some food stuff. Ceres does some life cycle assessments on different things. Foodprint, if you want to see the the carbon footprint of your food. But yeah, you know, and organic is good too. There's a lot of things like monocultures versus polycultures we can't really vote with on a consumer level, and that's why I really went with plant-based, because that's something that consumers do have a say in when it comes to changing our food system. This is where we can really change it. There's a lot of things that's out of our hands that's going to take years with legislation and passing laws, but here we have the power. Okay, so I didn't go over health because I really wanted to make this talk about not just me, but how our actions really affect the world around us, and really think of everything else. But surprisingly, a plant-based diet, a healthy one, is associated with lower risk of diabetes, heart disease, and increased lifespan, quality of life. So lots of good stuff. Good places to go for that if you're concerned about where to get your protein or things like that. Nutritionfacts.org has your back on that. Forks Over Knives has a lot of healthy free recipes, thousands. And then Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. It's of the most respected physicians, and they give you all the good info. So yeah, make sure your sources are good. And here's some works cited. And I also wanted to bring up this, my website, Casting This Tap. So this is my website, and I talk about my talks. If you guys want me to do a talk somewhere else, let me know. And the other services I provide. I also have a place you can donate. So I make this talk completely free to the public, so this message is accessible to everyone. But if you would like to donate me and become a Patreon so I can do more of these talks, continue going to universities and environmental events and giving this talk, feel free to look me up, Morgan Apperson, Sustainable Food System, guest speaker, comes up on Google, Morgan Apperson.